Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the May 2016 VIRL webinar, part of the ongoing series dedicated to helping you optimize your use of VIRL. I'm your host today, Matt Saunders, and we'll go ahead and take you through the agenda slide. Today's agenda will feature a Docker overview as well as IOL-L2 support by Joel Obstfeld. Then we'll cover adding graphics to your diagrams by Dan Bork and Peter Griek, as well as an overview of the Cisco Learning Network by myself. So I will talk with everybody soon, and with that, let's get the ball directly over to Joel.
All right, thank you very much, Matt. And good morning to everybody, or good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to the May webinar. Thank you very much, Matt, for the intro. Great to see so many people joining the webinar for today. And we're going to be concentrating on some new features, new functionality, which is going to be coming up in the next VIRL release. So that's probably going to be sort of the latter half of June. So we have to wait a while before you can get your hands on the features that we're going to be showing you today. So we're going to start off looking at Docker. So you may have come across Docker already in the work that you're doing today. For some people, it may be absolutely new. You may have heard noises about it. So we want to give you a bit of background as to what Docker is and then show you some of the things that can be done with it. Okay, so today we have virtual machines that you can operate inside of VIRL. You're used to using those today. So for example, the iOS-V, iOS-V-L2, NXOS, etc. And some time back, we introduced the Linux container capability. So the things like the lightweight Ubuntu server, iPerf, more recently Routem, and also Ostinato drone. To that, we're then adding in Docker instances. So they will sit alongside as effectively first-class citizens alongside the other forms of machine and the network devices that we have available today. So no changes in respect to how you'll work with them, how you design your network, how you configure them, how you operate them. It's all exactly the same. So this is just another mechanism by which we can get hold of interesting kinds of virtual machines that you can then plug into the environment. But not virtual machines. This is using Docker instances. Okay, so with Docker, there are a number of different sources that you can use to get hold of your images. You don't have to rely on the VIRL team to provide them. So you can reach out to these things called Docker registries, effectively libraries, repositories full of recipes for creating your Docker instance. There can be public repositories. So for example, Docker themselves have one called hub.docker.com. You can take a look at a vast range of different kinds of Docker instances that are available. Some of them from very well-known sources, some of them just private individuals who are posting things. You can also use private repositories. So you may be working in a company where you have Docker instances that you use. Alternatively, you may go out and maybe create stuff yourself. So yeah, it's a couple of different sources that you can use, but they're there for you. And obviously with the public sources, there's a wide variety of different options that are there that you can explore. So how are we actually implementing on VIRL? Okay, so Docker can be used in a number of different ways, but what we are doing is we're actually putting the Docker functionality inside another virtual machine. So we're using something called CoreOS. Okay, so this is a virtual machine image, and actually I noticed that there was at least one person who said, what is this CoreOS image that suddenly appeared that I can download? So this is effectively the host on top of which we're then running our Docker instances. Now, why are we doing that? Partly for security, but also it constrains and restricts how big you can go, so you are able to put some memory controls around the resource utilization of the various Docker instances that you have there. So you have the CoreOS sitting there. It looks like a virtual machine. It acts like a virtual machine, but it has the key functionalities. You can see in the diagram, the etcd and the Docker functionality inside. So that's really what's sitting there. So the instances themselves, you can have many Docker instances. Really depends on how much memory you give your CoreOS instance. So for example, the CoreOS instance will come set to 2 gig. that may not be sufficient. There's this misconception that Docker means lightweight. That is far from the truth. It really depends on what you're packing into your Docker instance. So for example, if you've got Nagios, so that's a fairly well-known network management and a reporting system, that is very, very heavy by comparison to something relatively lightweight like an Apache web server. So you do need to be very careful and saying, oh, I can just pack as many of these things into my CoreOS instance as I like. No, you have to be very, very careful because if you go out and you grab something, let's say MRTG, for example, that may be quite lightweight, but you go out and pick up another instance, let's say Nginx, that might be quite heavyweight. So you do need to be quite careful. You need to do a little bit of planning around the Docker instances that you're going to have in there. One other piece that we do put in place is the maximum number of Docker instances that we can have at any point in time. And I'll explain why we have this in a moment. So how does the networking actually work? Well, it's exactly the same as you'll have done in the past in terms of you're designing your network. You're just now going to be dropping in these Docker instances and adding those into your network. So nothing new that actually needs to be created in there. However, if we look a little bit closer, what's actually going on under the hood? So in this case, we've got the two instances connected up, as we can see. Well, this is what it actually looks like. So what we've done is we've got those Docker instances plugged in, running inside CoreOS. And as far as the routers, iOS v3 and 4 are concerned, they are talking directly to those Docker instances. They're not, they do not see the CoreOS instance in between. But our host layer, KVM, that we use as our hypervisor to actually run our virtual machines, that imposes a limit, the number of network interfaces that any one virtual machine can actually have. And that's where we get that restriction as to just 22 interfaces that you can use, because CoreOS itself needs interfaces. So this isn't meant to be a tutorial all about Docker and how it works. Some links there where you can find a lot more about it. So both learning material that's there, but also the Docker repository, hub.docker.com, and you can go take a look and see what kinds of things are available. But I'm going to switch now. I'm going to show you this functionality in action. So if you give me a moment, I'm going to flip. So we should now be seeing our Docker environment. So here's a demo topology that I've created. So we've got a number of different kinds of of instances that are running here. Here you can see as normal over on the panel, well, our various different element types. But we've now got this Docker instance, and I've loaded in two specific kinds of Docker instance. So an Apache web server and Nagios, the two that we just mentioned in the slides, and designed this environment here. So we've got a bunch of IOSVs, IOSVL2, Apache instances, and also the Nagios instance that's sitting up on the side. I've also plugged in an LXC, so that's a server, so not a Docker instance, but just a regular server. And that's all spun up. So in the best traditions of a live demonstration, here's one I did earlier. So we're plugged in, all the instances are up and running, and we can try and log in. Now, when we're dealing with Docker instances, you have to remember that these are not necessarily capable of running a shell. So if you're used to logging into like your Linux servers, you may not be able to do that, right? The Docker instance is designed to run one particular process or a very small set of processes. So in this case, the Apache web server. So if you were to actually try and connect into this thing, you can't. We actually don't even offer the ability to connect to it. There is no shell that's actually running here. Similarly, if I want to connect onto my Nagios instance, again, there's no shell that's actually running here. So the purpose of these instances is, yeah, I want to add applications. I actually want to add things that I would see in my real environment, my production network, into my simulation. So let's take a look at what we can do. So for example, here I've got my Linux host, so I'm going to connect into that. There we go. Okay, so I'm connecting in on my Linux host, logging in with password Cisco. Or did I fat finger it? Nope, there we go, we're in. So what can I actually do here? Well, these are running Apache web servers. So if I use a function like wget and tell it to go take a look at 10.0.0.3, which is the Apache instance over here, Apache instance number 4 down there in the corner. Off it goes. It just grabbed, and we can see there's an index file there. So if we just take a quick look at the output there, here we can see. So we got confirmation the Apache server is up. It's serving up a default web page. You can go in there and you can alter that. No problem, you can certainly do that. Similarly, if we want to shoot some traffic across in the other direction, so to go over here to Apache 3, again, wget 10.0.0.12. There we go. So again, cat the index file, there it is. And yeah, we've just grabbed data from across there. So using the range of different tools that Docker provides for us, we can explore and we can start to add application servers or even network monitoring systems into our environment. So for example, here we've got a Docker Nagios instance that's up and running. I've got it connected to Flat. So that now allows me to take a web browser, point it at that thing, and let me just switch over so we're showing this. So we'll come back to that in a moment. So here it is. I'm now pointed to 172.16.1.152. So this is my Nagios instance that's actually sitting on that host. So all I did is I didn't have to spend time setting up Nagios. Okay, so I can use the Docker recipe, the Docker file, to effectively set up and provide for me much more readily and easily an application like Nagios that I want to then have running in my environment. So rather than having to sit there and create custom virtual machines or custom containers, I can potentially, explore the Docker Hub. So we'll take a quick look here, explore the Docker Hub, find some instance that I'm particularly interested in, and then add that into my environment very quickly and easily. So if you wanted, a WordPress website or something of that nature, you could plug in. No problem. It's a case of pulling that in, adding that into your environment, and then away you go. So lots of interesting things here, not only, as I mentioned, standard distributions and applications, official ones like this, but there are custom ones you can build. There's plenty of material. So if you've got particular applications or tool sets, yeah, absolutely. You could use Docker recipes, Docker files to then build a Linux container that you can add into your environment and have that as part and parcel of your environment with all your tools already installed. So hopefully another tool for you guys to explore, to experiment with, and see how you can, add that into your learning experience and add that into the environments that you use. Okay, so we're going to move on. Let me just stop the share and we'll switch back to the slides for a moment. Okay, so moving on. Sorry, we had a question. So how much memory are actually utilizing in that environment? Let me quickly share again. Sorry, one moment. Okay, so the simulation that we're running here, there we go. Okay, so all of the Apache instances that you see here and the Nagios instance are running in about 1.8 gigs of memory on top of my CoreOS instance. So the Linux container here, which is running Ubuntu, is about half a gig of memory. And then it's 300 megs, 384 megs for each one of the various instances here. And this is all running on top of my laptop. So I've got an 8 gig VIRL server that's running in this environment at the moment. So, as I mentioned, don't expect to be able to pack vast amounts into a CoreOS instance with only 2 gigs of memory. But what you certainly can do is crank the amount of memory on the CoreOS instance. So if you wanted to, you could take it to 3 gig, 4 gig, however much you want. And then obviously, yes, you can expand the number of Docker instances that you have running inside that CoreOS container. Okay, so let's move on. I'm going to just quickly stop that simulation while we move on to the next section of today's webinar. Okay, so we are very, very happy to announce that in the new version of VIRL, we are going to be including support for IOL and IOL-L2. So that's iOS on Linux, which we're adding into the toolkit for you. So some of you may have come across IOL before. This has been historically an internal development platform that's been around inside Cisco for many, many years. It's relatively lightweight, it's relatively small, it's only on iOS and only on certain areas of iOS. Certain trains of iOS. So there's certainly not the complete range. We're going to be including just one to start with, one IOL instance and one IOL layer 2 image as well that you'll be able to use. And again, just like you saw with the Docker feature, it's going to be used in exactly the same way, exactly the same kind of workflow as you've been using to date. So we're using what they call i86 binary images, and we will include the functionality. So if you have one of these images already, you will be able to load your own IOL instance, IOL image into VIRL and to be able to use that. So what we've done is we've taken the images and packaged them as a Linux container. Okay, so we're not running IOL directly on our VIRL host. We're running them in Linux containers. It means, though, there's no console port. And also because of the environment that we're plugging into, this is Ethernet only. I know that's going to disappoint some people. We're not providing serial port capabilities because we need the environment to be able to allow us to connect our instances, whether that's a virtual machine, whether it's a container, whether it's a Docker instance, or whether it's get out onto physical network using flat. We need to be able to cover all of that. And if we've got the serial support, that's not going to work. You can't have serial at one end and Ethernet at the other. So it's Ethernet only. These are relatively small. They're only about 100 megs of memory, so you can run quite a sizable simulation in a relatively small VIRL server. And we're going to show you some of that capability in a moment. So what you'll see, and you may have spotted it before when I flipped over to VM Maestro, you may well have seen the IOL instance will appear just like, and just another icon that's going to be available in Maestro and both in the web editor. And you use it exactly the same way as we've done before. Nothing changes. You design, you configure, and you spin up. So let's take a quick look at that. So we're going to just flip the application. Okay, so just want to show you the speed at which this is actually working. So here is my demo topology. Okay, so let me zoom in a little bit here. There we go. So we've got a whole series of IOL instances that you can see here, and a bunch of IOL layer 2, and just for good measure, some Route M instances. So there's about 24 instances that we have in here. So again, I'm running on VIRL running on my local laptop, so this is just running within an 8 gig system. So I'm going to launch, and we're going to see how long this takes to come up. So we can see simulation starting. Fingers crossed. Okay, so we're starting to see the messages as those start to unpack. And those instances are now starting to come up. So there we go. Okay, so those instances have now gone active. So configuration is now being loaded in. So we've got 24 instances, and that's now chugging through. And we can see the L2 is going active. And just while that's doing that, so in terms of the configuration side, so if we just flip back here and just click on one of the instances, the configuration, again, it's going to be handled by AutoNetKit. It can generate all the configuration for you. It's exactly the same. It's just a regular iOS configuration that's in there. The one thing to note is these are Ethernet interfaces. So with iOS V, it's gigabit Ethernet. Here we've got Ethernet. Okay, so those are slightly different. Also, the interface layout is slightly different. Okay, so that simulation view should be up. There we go. So all instances up, and that was for about maybe just under 2 minutes. So if we log in to one of these devices, so let's pick this guy here. Oops, helps if I put the right view. There we go. Okay, so we're going to connect in. And again, there's no console ports in here, so it's still to the management port or SSH into the management port. There we go. And we are in, and there's the show version. So we can see, that's an IOL instance that's running there, and the configuration, exactly as we've seen before, all being injected. Now, just for grins, I've brought up this RouteM instance here. So I'm going to just connect in here. And I've got a RouteM config. So routem-f./routem. Okay, so that's going to bring up and inject a bunch of OSPF prefixes, a bunch of BGP prefixes. And if we take a look, show IP BGP sum. There it is. Okay, so we just injected 1,000 prefixes. That's up. We've got all our other BGP neighbors still coming up right now. And if I take a look at the show IP route table, we can see in a moment. There it is. Okay, so all these OSPF prefixes that we can see added in here, these are all coming in from our RouteM instance. So let's just log in on another device on the other side of the network. Just like that. There we go. Okay, so SSH in. Avoid the fat finger. And there we can see the OSPF routes have been propagated right throughout the network. And hopefully if we see show IP BGP sum, they haven't propagated through yet, but those will come across as those get copied around. Additional functionality, so the live visualization function, that will be working. Also extract configuration, so that'll be working. So again, you'll be able to use all of these capabilities that you're used to using. Now, one thing to remember for the node count, how am I able to run this number of nodes? Linux containers do not count against the node license. So you may have a 20 node license or a 30 node license. That's only for Cisco virtual machines. We're not counting the containers. So you could get some pretty expansive topologies, sort of 50, 60 nodes or containers. I mean, you can see this. This is actually running in just under 2 gigs of memory. Right, so although this is an 8 gig machine, the total amount of memory for this is approximately 2 gig for the simulation itself. So you could run some fairly large container-only environments without ever running into any capacity issues with the node count itself. So hopefully that gives you, an additional capability and an additional part to the toolkit to really go wild with some of the network topologies that you can actually run. So that should, I hope, give some people some inspiration as to, what could we build, and not having to necessarily deal with, my network, my topology is just too big. So we're looking forward to releasing this. It will be in the next version of VIRL, probably towards the end of July. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of a taster as to what to expect. Okay, Matt, I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Joel. And let's get Dan or Peter. I'm not too sure which one of you would like to take the ball for this next session. Dan, would you?
Sure.
Okay. We'll get it right to you. Thank you very much.
All right. So I'll be talking about the much requested feature of adding graphical annotations and textual annotations to topologies. So I'm starting out with a small topology here. And you'll notice that in the topology palette view, there is now a new section called Annotations. We currently only have rectangle, ellipse, line, and text, but that list may grow in the future. And as you would expect, it's fairly intuitive. You just go ahead and drag and drop new annotations to your topology. All of these annotations are currently being rendered entirely behind your topology. So your links, your interfaces, your nodes, your groups will always be rendered in the foreground. But within the annotations layer, you can control the layering of the annotations, bring them to front, back, all that stuff. For each of the annotation types, you get the properties view showing you the editable attributes. I'm sorry if I'm speaking quickly. I know that I only have, I think, about 5 minutes to show all the features, so I'll go through them very quickly. So for rectangles, pardon me, you can control the corner radius. By default, it shows you a radius of 10. If I edit that to 30, you get the concept. If I change the fill opacity, you can get it to see through. You can change the foreground color. the color pickers will be platform specific. So I happen to be running on a Mac, running El Capitan, so I get the pencil palette here. I get the predefined palette things. We may be able to provide you with a VM Maestro or BBE specific palette for consistent look and feels. Go to the color palette, you can choose your hex colors here, which is the same being displayed here, etc., etc. That's pretty standard across the board. I just want to show it to you. If you take any of the opacity, either the fill or the border opacity, and you bring it completely to transparent, you'll see that the subsequent controls get disabled because you, of course, aren't rendering the contents of the border, so we're not going to allow you to edit the color or the board width, stuff like that. And these sliders also act as switches, so if you want to toggle it completely invisible, completely opaque, you just click on the slider itself and it'll become transparent or fully opaque. The border width, fairly self-explanatory. You can make it arbitrarily huge. Actually, let's make it something like 50 and make the border semi-transparent just to show you that it's currently rendering it at 50% inside and outside. In the future, we may allow you to do the stroke completely inside, completely outside, but for now, this is what you get. And the controls always remain the exact bounds of the figure itself. And lastly, the border pattern. So you can choose whatever style you wish. As I said, the foreground background capability. For the ellipse, it's actually a little simpler because you don't have the radius. You just have the fill and the border controls. For a line, you control each endpoint, so you can tack it on to existing data model elements within your topology, or you can free float them. And let's make a diamond beginning and arrow endpoint and change the color. And maybe change the border. Anyway, that's pretty self-explanatory as well. Let's see, and lastly, text. So if you drag and drop a text element here, you can support a multi-line text. Let me make that huge. Show you that you can do bolding, italics, underlined, and strike through. You can align the whole block either. This is actually left, center, and right. We're using the words start, middle, and end to be SVG compliant, and also to allow possibly in the future right to left, left to right, and top to bottom languages or alphabets. But you get the idea. You can center whichever way you want. You can also manually type any size you wish. It doesn't have to be one of the the commonly used sizes. You can type whatever value you want in here. The font family is quite limited right now. We only allow sans serif, serif, and monospaced in order to ensure portability across platforms. But this list may grow if the demand is large enough, but for now it's just those three. And that is about it. Other than the text itself, you can actually edit inline. So you just click on the text itself and you can type directly on the canvas. And just to show you a couple of pre-baked elements here, just to show you that you can create some elements, kind of composite elements. So this is actually an ellipse plus a rectangle to show you that funky shape. Oh, sorry, wrong one. There we go. So in this version, each one of these annotations are actually free-floating, so they're not anchored to any element within your topology. In a future version, you will actually be able to anchor it to anything, including model elements, such as your nodes, your interfaces even, or nodes within a collapsible group. And so we're making some decisions right now as to, like, if you attach a text element to a node that's within a group, and then you collapse that group, that text obviously should not be rendered at the moment, stuff like that. But it will allow you to effectively, when you move the element that's anchored to it, the annotations anchored to it will move along with it. as well as lines. You'll be able to anchor either endpoint of the lines to various model element or other annotations. So you effectively can create groupings that way. And just another couple of examples of what you can achieve with this stuff. These are pretty straightforward. These just came from some of the screenshots we had from user requests. And lastly, this one, just to show you, you can create completely opaque, transparent figures with opaque borders, stuff like that. And again, you can control the bordering. Importantly, this version of VMaestro, once we release it on the wild, will also support a native XML editor. So also importantly, if you hover your mouse over the file itself, you'll see that the tooltip previews properly render those annotations as well, and it is printer friendly. So let me just give you a quick example. If I open with, you used to only have the text editor, now you have an actual schema-aware XML editor. So if you open this up and go to your annotations group, you'll see that if I show you the stroke pattern, the tooltip shows you the possible stroke patterns. So instead of relying on the IDE, you could have a schema-aware XML editor outside of VMaestro or BBE and perform all this stuff. And it assists you with code completion as well. So if I continue to elaborate here, it tells me what attributes I'm allowed to edit. All that stuff will be part of the next VMaestro. Talked about anchoring, grouping. You also get, of course, the common alignment capabilities. So even if you select annotations and or model elements, you can now right-click on them and do align. Why didn't it? Oh, it's because it's inside of a group. Yeah, sorry. If I go here, these two here, and say align to bottom, all that type of stuff. You can also do copy-paste across different topologies, even across different VMaestro instances. And that, I believe, is it. That seems to be everything on my list. So I hope you'll provide us feedback with what you can achieve with this stuff. Thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. So I'm glad to introduce you the web editor feature of annotations. Let me just share my screen and we will start on. Okay. Hope everyone can see this. Okay, so this is the browser-based editor. For the quickness, I loaded already a topology, which is including like 12 routers, 2 switches, and 4 servers. So as Dan mentioned, we developed this new feature called annotations. So in the editor, there is this new button called annotations. When you click on it, you'll get the palette, the same as in VMaestro, so rectangle, ellipse, line, and text. So let's try to draw something. We'll click on the rectangle. Let's say that this part of the topology is one big part, and we can separate it like this with another rectangle. If you finish and return, we can, of course, select the rectangle, and we have the same attributes as in VMaestro. So, like for example, the corner radius, we can edit it. We can change the fill opacity. We can change the fill color. As Dan mentioned, the color picker is based on the OS you're using. So I'm using Windows, so it looks quite differently. So if I choose this color, it will change. We have also the other options for the border. We can edit border width and border pattern, etc. If we want to, for example, select multiple elements, and we can do a bulk change with the Shift key and change the border pattern, for example, of both of these elements. So that was the rectangle. Let's return to a different shape. Let's draw some ellipse. So one ellipse, the second ellipse. Let's finish and return. We can now drag this ellipse here. And oh, if you click on the element, you will get this yellow highlight border with these small squares. The small squares are used for resizing. So you can make any size you would like to have. Let's resize also this one. And again, the same attributes as in VM Maestro. So for example, let's change the colors of these two guys. Okay, so we got the ellipse. The last one, oh, sorry, no, two more left. So we have a text. Let's make like 3 types of texts. And let's, oops, sorry, I didn't want to move the whole topology. Okay, so we can change the text here. We can call it ISN 100. Let's pick monospace font and let's make it a bit bigger. We can make it bold and underline because it will be the name of this part of the topology. Let's set the other one to ISN 200. For the sake of consistency, let's use the same attributes. Bold, underline, oops, underline, okay. Let's drag it inside, okay. And this last one, let's use the multi-line text option as well. And we will say that we have a web server, very important. And this web servers, very important, will be on high security. Okay, let's drag this up so you can see it better. Okay, so we got it here. And the last piece is the line. So let's connect this text to this server. Finish and return, and we can add the arrows so it's more clear that the very important web server is this guy here. Okay, so as you see, we can now create some nice looking topology, which is more clear for the users, which nodes are a part of which topology part, and etc. So thank you very much. I hope you like it and it will help you in the future topology creation processes. Thank you.
Looks great. Thank you very much, Peter. Joel, do you see any questions or anything in the Q&A that we'd like to speak to?
There's some questions about memories and CPU, which I think we've covered that. So when I was doing the Docker and IOL demos, that was a 8 gig system with 4 CPU cores. Another person was asking, does this mean that we're going to be dropping the IOSV and IOSV-L2 virtual machines? No, we will have both. There are some features that will be present in one platform that may not be in the other. So there's no plan to replace one with the other at this point in time. And there was another, what's the difference between the two different environments that we just showed with doing the annotations? So remember, VM Maestro is an Eclipse-based application that's typically installed on your desktop, whereas the web editor is just an application that you use with your standard web browser. So some people like to have the offline editing capabilities that we get with VM Maestro. Some people prefer to use a web browser. All sorts for everybody. So we're trying to provide those capabilities for everyone.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Should I go ahead and transition to the Cisco Learning Network coverage? All right, I'll go ahead and take over and take care of that then. So as you may have heard, the support community for for VIRL has been migrated to the Cisco Learning Network. So just by a quick way of overview and introduction, we'll just walk you through a couple key points about the Cisco Learning Network. It is a collaborative IT learning community that has been around since 2008. The primary charter is to service and support for certifications, however, obviously as well for lifelong learning. So definitely many people use VIRL to work with their studies. So I think it'll be a natural fit over there. Currently have over 1 million registered users actually, and it's a quite active community overall. For the VIRL community itself, I want to just make sure everybody's aware of how to be sure to register for the Cisco Learning Network and then how to find the VIRL community space. So from the homepage for registration, you can either log in with an existing account or go ahead and register in the upper right-hand corner of the site. It is essentially it should be exactly the same username and password for all of your other Cisco.com logins. If you have a Cisco Support Community account or have taken a certification exam, you likely already have an account, so you shouldn't have to worry too much. It's all supporting the Cisco's single sign-on username and password. So once you click Login at the top, the very first time you join the site, you'll be asked to create a new account on the Cisco Learning Network, just a couple of quick profile information questions, maybe a quick profile photos, etc., that kind of a thing. And then you can begin participating in the community overall. To navigate to the VIRL users group or support community, you can simply go to the top navigation, click on the community option, slide down to all community content, and over to user groups, and there you will find the VIRL users group. And I'll do a quick walkthrough of this on the site in just a moment as well. From there, you'll find the VIRL group where you'll find videos, technical documents, discussion forums, FAQs, key documents, et cetera, all the key resources that you're used to having and that you need. And it will be moderated primarily by our coworker, Carlo Bobilis, who was not able to join us today, but will be on future webinars. However, Brett Lovins and myself will also be available to assist. And of course, community support from a peer-to-peer format as well. Let's see here, just gonna keep an eye on the Q&A just to make sure. No questions related to this. Okay, great, thank you very much. So pretty straightforward and simple. Join the, make sure you register for the Cisco Learning Network itself, navigate to the VIRL group through the mega menu at the top, and go ahead and get started, and you'll be an active member of the community. I'll do a quick little show and tell on the site as well. Okay, so one more time. From the community button at the top, all community content, user groups, VIRL user groups will take you right here to the group homepage, where you can do a search. You can navigate through the categories. You'll see all the recent content, as well as key information like release notes, ordering support, newsletters, and key documentation off to the right here. And so that pretty much covers the group there and the Cisco Learning Network overview. And so let's see here. Let's get us back to the slide deck. And I think we can finish up with some Q&A. Joel, what do you think there?
Sure, thank you, Matt. So thank you everybody for the questions. A lot of questions then coming in through from people today, which is great. We love you guys asking questions. One of the questions that was just being put up, can you support multiple versions of IOL? So we're only going to be providing one IOL and one IOL-L2 image. But yes, absolutely, you can install multiple versions if you've got them. There will be a function to wrap that and build a Linux container that will have that image directly included. So if you've got multiple images, then yeah, absolutely, you can add that straight in. Another question, are we keeping the YouTube channel? Yes, absolutely, we'll be keeping the YouTube channel. No changes in that regard. All that's happening, as Matt just outlined, is we've moved from the Discourse platform and bring everybody across onto the Cisco Learning Network platform. And we hope you will enjoy all the new capabilities and also all the additional material that's available through CLN. There was another question. When will the Nexus 9K image be released? Lots of people ask questions about Nexus features. So people may recall that we put out a note a little while back that development on the N7K image, the NXOS-V image, is basically being discontinued. And focus is now on the Nexus 9000V image. So that's due to be available towards the end of this calendar year. So yeah, certainly end of Q3, sometime in Q4, somewhere around that. But we don't know exactly when that's going to be out, and we don't know exactly which features and functionality will be included in there. A few people have been asking, what's the difference? Will there be a list of differences between the iOS-V and IOL? Absolutely, we will do our very best to try and provide a comprehensive list of features and functionality that are included. I'm sure we will make mistakes. Inevitably, we will make mistakes. But we'll do our best to provide a list of what you can expect to have within the IOL, and obviously the IOL-L2 images as well. And certainly that will have that when we get closer to the release. But hopefully you'll find some of those features that are there. That'll be useful for you. Okay.
Okay, so just to wrap with a couple of quick useful links. Of course, the official VIRL site. You'll see the new link here for the support forum on the Cisco Learning Network. You'll see that definitely the VIRL YouTube channel is staying active. And of course, the other key resources here on DevNet and GitHub. And with that, I think that's a wrap for the month, unless anyone has any more questions that they want to make sure we address or last-minute comments.
Just one last thing. Les just asked, previous VIRL webinars available? Yes, absolutely. Please take a look at the YouTube channel. All of the recordings from the previous webinars are there. Also, there's another gentleman, where was it? Yeah, Edwin was asking about VIRL and packet integration. Edwin, please take a look at the VIRL YouTube channel. You'll find the material and the walkthroughs on packet integration there as well. So a lot of material, a lot of good resources there. So do please take a look.
And I just dropped in, yeah, definitely dropped in all of the links to the useful links into the chat window. So if there's one that somebody wants to click on before they leave here today, please do. Okay, so thank you very much. And Joel and panelists, we'll go ahead and wrap and we'll keep the session open for just a few minutes here with the Q&A, but the audio will now end. Thank you very much.